Back for another hangout session with Andrea here. So we're going to wing it today. What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about, the fun conversation domains, right?
Like domains. I'm a big domainer. Probably not as big as other people, but um, I have more domains than I should own. That's for sure. But I think every entrepreneur probably has more domains than they should own, I would say.
Yeah, me too. And then there's those one-off purchases, right, that happen for no reason at all. Maybe you're tired, maybe you're just upset because you thought things are not going well. So F it, let's start a new one. And then you regret it 2 weeks later, right?
So I kind of have like specific rules in terms of like what I'd buy and what I don't buy. Uh, things fall into three buckets for me. Um, and in a way, it's my secret hobby is to buy domains. Uh, and so bucket number one are domains I intend on using based on the ideas that I have. So, for example, I'm sure every entrepreneur is like sitting there saying, "Yeah, I have this list of ideas of all these things I want to build, companies I want to start." And rather than work on them, it is so much more fun to start Googling and go to GoDaddy to search for domains and just buy the domain and think you accomplished something. So I am guilty of that close to 1,000 times. I think there's probably about 800 domains in my portfolio. So that's a lot of ideas and startups and stuff that I've been putting aside. Um, but I think that's where everybody starts, and that's why they get into the domaining world until they realize, hey, there's actually people who make a lot of money doing this. And let's be honest, naturally everybody thinks they can do it too. So then they try to do it and realize it's actually harder than it looks to pick the right domains, just like it's hard to pick the right stocks or pick the right crypto to put your money in. It's kind of the same thing. But going back to my three buckets. So bucket number one, companies I want to start. Therefore, I'll go search for the ideal domain name for those companies and secure them. Um, Bucket number two are domains for that where I just think the name is great. It's opportunistic, it's available, or it's for sale at a reasonable price. So then I say to myself, you know what, let me just secure it for the, what ifs, for the woulda, coulda, shouldas of the world. Like, I'll just buy it. Um, and worst case scenario, I know I could always just put it back on sale and get my money back. So hopefully it's a net wash in the worst case scenario, hopefully.
Hopefully,
um,
yeah.
and then bucket number three would be domain names that you're just buying for the sake of using them for some business operations functionality. So those could be cold email purposes, for example. Sometimes you have to buy your company branded domain names across the board, just and use them for cold emailing. Sometimes some people will buy them solely just to protect the brand name so that someone else doesn't squat on that name. So if I had, for example, 99 Robots or Rocket Hub, one of my companies, I would obviously go and buy the .net, the .io, the .biz, all of them. You're not going to use them really, but you may. And if you do, it's really just for protection. It's just for cold emailing purposes. So that could make up a sizable chunk for some people. But those are the three buckets that my domains fall into. In bucket two, though, sometimes it's more so for the SEO value as well. So I do a lot of that. We can talk about that actually. That's a fun topic. I just did that last week, 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago, where I bought two domains in the same day, and now they're both pointing to recent startups of mine, and they're both perfect. They're great domain names. I was surprised how little I had to pay for them. I think I wrote a post about them in my SEO pilot Facebook group. But yeah, domains is a special topic. I have a love-hate relationship with them. I could waste my time hanging out and just looking for domains because that's always the fun process. It's the genesis of a company, right? It's the genesis of something you're going to put online. So something feels very warm and fuzzy about securing that domain name and saying this is it. You know, it's like naming your child almost, right? Um, but at the same time, two things. Number one, I I hate the fact that uh, people spend too much time trying to find a domain, and I also hate the fact that sometimes people use that as an excuse for why something hasn't been built.
Right,
Right?
right. The
Right?
perfect domain.
Yeah. Exactly. Perfection ain't going to get you very far. But then again, I mean, you know, there are some people who will come from the school of, hey, you know, you want to secure the perfect domain on day one so that later you don't have to go through the rebranding exercise, lose a little bit of the SEO and the traffic, create
Mhm.
confusion with your user base, things like that. And then there's the others that are just like, I don't care what you call it on day one. If you get big enough, you'll have the money to buy whatever top level domain, premium domain that you want. Um,
Right.
I come from the first school. I'm just like, just name it properly from the beginning. Um, but I know most people do not agree with that. They would say, you know, actually have the problem of needing to rebrand, and that's a good thing, and then buy the domain when you have the funds to do so. I just tend to like to start and never rebrand.
But wait, there were definitely a bunch of successful companies, and we were just talking about this a few minutes ago. We are like, what the heck are we to talk about? We are so prepared, trust me. And there were some companies that were definitely successful, but they didn't start out with the right domain name, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I get asked if, like, you know, a company should spend the money on a domain name, and my default answer is yes. Okay, which is not what most people expect. I'm a firm believer that, hey, look, if you have the funds, go ahead and just buy the right domain name. I'm big on branding. Um, I want my domain names to meet a certain criteria. Um, and I guess that criteria would be number one, I want to always own the .com. To the extent I have control over it, I want to own the .com.
Hmm.
So if that's going to cost a little bit of, you know, cash, so be it. It is what it is. So you definitely want the .com. Number two, you want it to be as short as possible,
Right. 6 to
right?
8 characters, something
Yeah,
like
if you
that.
can get it even shorter, better,
Hmm.
right? But as short as possible. Number three, it has to be pronounceable, right?
Like
So
not the.
you can have a short name, but if I can't pronounce it and
Mhm.
enunciate it so that you know exactly how it's spelled, to me,
Right.
that's not a great domain name. All right. So if I were to say to someone, I mean, let's just use my own companies, right? Hey, I work at Rocket Hub. You know exactly how to spell that. There is no misinterpretation of that, right?
Unless you buy
Uh,
the KT, unless you buy the shorten, which is something I know you hate without the
I hate
vowels.
that. Yeah, that's again, you can have a great name and then you know, have a silly TLD at the end, and to me
Right.
that just ruins the whole experience. I mean, people got to find you, right?
Mhm.
And if you have a common word that you're using and they're Googling for it and you're not on page one or even in the top two, they're not finding you. So you're kind of losing traffic and you're losing some credibility there, and then people can find you online. Now, for some
And then,
businesses, that's just fine.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but you're giving someone else the traffic because they're ranking on your marketing, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
Mm.
and you will find that in most cases, if you try to call your business something short and fancy, there's someone else with the same business, same service, same product. So you probably want to avoid that. So yeah, so you want a .com, you want it to be memorable, you want it to be pronounceable. Um, and then number four would be you want to make sure it's something you can rank. So for example, you know, if I was gonna get a name for, I don't know, pets, I'm probably not gonna rank for pets, right?
That's
Pets.com
not
is gonna, yeah, it's gonna own that, right? And that's gonna be very difficult. I'm gonna get squashed by not just them, but like 10 other major outlets out there.
right.
So that's going to be really hard to rank. So that's a consideration. Even if you have a good name, maybe that's not really the right name. Maybe that one you keep and sell it off later, um, and choose whatever's number two on your list. So those are probably the four biggest factors. And of course, number five is you just got to be able to afford the darn name. Nowadays, I mean, let's be honest, the good names are all taken. You can do the two-word names, you can do the three-word names, but now you're just getting longer and longer and longer. It works to a certain extent, um, but if you follow those rules, you'll end up in a pretty happy place not having to rebrand later, right? There's probably a fifth rule I could add in there, which is it has to be somewhat relevant, right? Now, I know some people would say, um, well, I found this really cool short name. Maybe that's what I'm going to use for my company name. Great. But if you can't put a story behind it and correlate it, like actually make it relevant to your brand, it's not going to have the same impact in the future. So, like you take something like Google. Some people will argue, well, Google's not related. It absolutely is related to what they do, right? It's, there's a derivation of it. There's a story behind the word Google and where it derived from. So there is a correlation there. There's relevance. There's story building, brand building there. Whereas something else may not have any story behind it, but you just thought it was a cool name because it met the first three or four criteria. So number five is definitely relevance slash brandable, like story. I could put a story behind it, right? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Of course, I'm muted. I was gonna say, I was gonna say, Rocket Hub has a great story um, behind the domain, right? Is it? I remember when you first started it, and you're like, "Yo, I look what I just did," and but there's a whole story behind it, right? In terms of who you bought it for, how much you bought it for, why you took such a huge leap. I don't know how much you want to disclose, but I think that story is pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah, we can talk about that. That one's one I can disclose a lot more than other domains I own. Yeah, we can talk about that. In fact, let me see if I can even pull up the first email I sent to the team when I bought Rocket Hub.
I
But
can
in
pull
the
up the
meantime,
first
yeah, if you can
you
pull
sent.
up that email, that Slack message, I think that would be interesting for people to see, why the name, all and the story and everything that you're doing makes a big difference when starting a startup. Um, but I guess let me circle back. So I had always wanted to build a platform to help startups. And the number one thing most startups struggle with is launching their product. And
Mm.
so naturally, I'm always eyeing the domain auctions on the various platforms. And um, this was about 2.5, 3 years ago. I saw Rocket Hub come up for auction. And so that piqued my interest. Now, even it was a very good fit for what I wanted to do. The timing was right. Everything was aligning. But it was actually a brand that existed 15 years ago, almost 14, 15 years ago. For those who know, back in 2010, rockethub.com was actually one of the first crowdfunding sites on the internet. In fact, it was the Kickstarter Indiegogo competitor. Uh, I think it probably was even a predecessor to both of those. It was
It
probably one
was
of
the
the
first,
first.
yeah,
Yeah.
one of the first.
I think it was started by a gentleman named Brian Meese, who coincidentally at that time in 2010, I had coffee with in New York City. Invited him to one of my meetup events. He spoke at one of my meetup events in New Jersey. Fast forward about 5 years to 20 around 2015. He sold the company to a private equity firm for a nice chunk of change. So he was no longer involved. I don't remember the name of the private equity firm, but they only managed it for only a few years, after
Mhm.
which the entire company, I believe, just became defunct or bankrupt or just went offline. They left the internet or whatever. Um, and the site was gone. So
Right.
that's about 2018, 2019. Fast forward to about late 2021, and that's when the auction came up for RocketHub.com. And I knew it was going to be a very active auction. Those who know about a name like RocketHub.com, though there's just so many things you can do with it because it's a very brandable and usable name across so many industries. You can use Rocket Hub across so many different industries. Luckily, it fit perfectly for what I was doing. And so I remember having a conversation with my wife, asking, "Hey, can I spend a lot of money on a domain name today?" I told her what the idea for it was, and she's like, "Yeah, you should do it." And so I started bidding, hoping that, hey, maybe I can get this for $10,000, $20,000. And the
Mhm.
bid kept running up and up and up and up and up. And I think the bid ended somewhere near $54,000 for the
Yeah, I
domain
was
name. Yeah. And
it was like
so 50,
5.
53.5, yeah, 53.5
Mhm.
is 53,500 is where the domain name actually sold at to me.
Mhm.
So pretty sizable chunk of change for a domain name. It's not every day you go spend that money on just a domain name, but here's, if you go look back at the major points I said as to what we look for when we're branding, right? It's a .com. Um, it's, pronounceable, spellable, right? Everyone, when you say it, you know how to spell it. Then we talked about it being relevant. We can build a story behind it. The old story was dead, so we didn't have to worry about that. We didn't have to worry about re-education, and so we could reinvent Rocket Hub to be the launch pad for startups. And
Right.
so that's exactly what we did. And so it fit all the criteria that we needed. And then the cherry on top was that it had some SEO value to it because it still maintained some of the backlinks from its olden days before it. So anytime I'm not starting at zero, I'm willing to pay a slight premium for that.
Right.
Starting at zero always sucks. So if you can avoid that, um, you should do that. And so I think um, the 53,000 was worth it,
Oh, I
but
got
more
it right
so,
here. Yeah. I
you
got
have
your
it?
in.
Yeah.
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 50, actually 51,500
Uh,
plus 8.85 US dollars for a yearly renewal. Sorry.
yeah, that last $8 hurt.
Yeah, her big on the renewal.
Yeah, the
um,
renewals definitely hurt. So yeah, so it's 51.5. Okay. Yeah, so it's 51.5. So yeah, that definitely hurt. But I think again, it goes back to the reason you don't have regrets when you make these type of purchases, right? Is
right.
one, you stuck to your requirements.
Hmm.
Number two was I was dead set on making it a brand. I was dead set that, okay, this is something I'm going to work on for the next 5 to 10 years. And so to anyone that's like thinking about, oh, should we spend, thousands of dollars on a domain name? My first question would probably be, how long do you want to run this company? If the answer is, hey, I could see myself working on something else within 6 to 12 months, then no, the answer is no. But if the answer is, I could see myself working on this for the next 5, 10, or even more years, then the answer is yes, absolutely. Love your name and build your brand, right? And I think anytime you put more money up front, you almost have that fire in you to go recoup it,
Hmm.
right? So if you look at that first message I had sent in Slack to the team, it was, "Hey, I spent a lot of money. Now help me make it back," right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I look at it. Is you are free. Again, we don't get to take money with us when we die. You are free to spend
Right.
as much money as you want. as long as you recoup it,
Hmm.
right? Make it back. And so goal number one was let's go make back 51,500 as quickly as possible. So
And
I
we did
know
that
that now, yeah, we did it pretty quickly. Yeah, we made that back real quickly.
first
And I
quarter.
think, yeah, pretty much the first quarter.
Yeah.
So I think the name was, uh, it was relevant. It played a role in helping recoup those funds quicker, as
Hmm.
opposed to us being called ABCXYZ or whatever. And now we are kind of building our own story. Even though we're still young, we're only 2.5 years since then.
Yeah.
Um, so I think we're building our own story. The other cool thing, almost like a byproduct, that came with buying that name specifically was when you say it to someone, they feel like they recognize it.
Yeah, it's that
Even, yeah,
the memory
and
thing.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's pretty cool as well. Is that when I say the name out loud, even if they've never been to our site, they feel like they've been there, and
Yeah.
that name recognition is pretty important. So that's a cool thing. The when I look across the portfolio of all of the names I have, right? There's not many that are, I'm going to spend, six figures on or whatnot. And I have some names that are worth some good money. But then
Right.
at the same time, I'm an amateur compared to the domain pros that are out there. I'm nobody. Like, their names would like squash my entire portfolio very quickly. I'm just an amateur. But I do know that if I were to sell off just my domain portfolio, there's a lot of value in there. Um, you know,
Right.
I mean,
I was saying
you
that the
know,
other day. I'm
yeah.
like, do we need a quick, few $1,000s? There's some money in the domain
Yeah,
valuation. People,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is true. I mean, I would never advise someone to look at domains in that context, but it can be if you're smart. Obviously, there are domainers who know a lot more about this and play in this space. I don't. I'm an amateur. I'm really just doing it for my own purposes or whatever. Or I like domains, so more so to build them. But occasionally, I'll use them for some other benefit. I rarely buy domains for the purposes of reselling them,
right,
but I
right,
also do make a judgment call based on the fact that if I ever needed to sell my domains, they could be resold, right? There
right.
is a market, someone would want them. So I think that's the way to play this game. Otherwise, you're really just gambling, because, it's really hard to sell domains. It takes time. It's not
Mhm.
something it's an instant purchase for most people. You have to find the right person and whatnot. Funny enough, I'm looking at my phone and it's GoDaddy calling me.
Yeah,
It's actually GoDaddy. In
time
fact,
to
it's
renew
not
the
just
bill.
GoDaddy, it's my broker at GoDaddy.
Yeah, time to renew the bill, or
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what it
Yeah.
is.
No,
And
actually they're awesome. And shout out to Joel, who works there. He's my broker. But he does a great job at keeping in touch with me to see if I ever need something for my next project because he knows I'm always up to something.
right,
And he knows I have maybe more appetite than the average person to spend for a good name. So yeah, no, shout out to them. They do a great job. Which is why all my domains live on GoDaddy. My sites don't, but my domains do.
that's a different story. We're not
Yeah,
talking about this.
that's a different topic. Yeah.
We're not talking about the
Um,
sites there, but
yeah. But
I mean,
I
so
mean,
there's
recently
some names.
there's been some good. Yeah, go ahead. You were gonna say something?
Oh, I was gonna say. I mean, you go ahead because it might not track. So let's keep going.
No, no.
You're
I feel like because there's not a lot of names available nowadays,
hmm.
the ability to secure a domain name that corresponds to what you're trying to build, um, that in itself is a brand building exercise. It's a huge growth hack. I'm trying to think of some of the names that recently applied this, and I think about I read a story with Dharmesh Shah from HubSpot. He bought chat.com recently,
Hmm. Yeah.
and it was for 8 figures, which I expect. again, makes complete sense that chat.com costs 8 figures. But I think it's even more sensible because of what's happening. If you think about how many chatbots there are nowadays, if you think
Yeah,
about
chat.
how, yeah, ChatGPT is like, a household term now. So everything's a chat. All AI is chat based. So to own chat.com for 8 figures almost feels cheap now,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
so I thought that was a great purchase by him, which our buddy Andrew Gazdecki,
Jackie, yep.
um, he bought his previous company was MicroAcquire, um, and they just acquired acquire.com a few years ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
It's public. I think it was for $240,000. He tweeted about it, or it was on LinkedIn. I forgot where it was, but they bought it for $240,000. I think that's a steal.
Yeah,
And I remember
I
when he
would.
tweeted, "Should I buy this?" And I was like, "Yes, you should go buy this. That is like that name would be perfect for your business, for what you're doing, and it is perfect for their business. And now it becomes such a branded company that it's like you own the keyword for what your entire company does, acquire. And it's like that's beautiful. And so that was a great purchase. $240,000 for acquire.com. Like, heck, I'll take that, and I don't even need it. Right?
Yeah,
Um, Similarly, um, Alex Hermosi
it's
bought acquisitions.com
yeah, that makes
around the
sense.
same time, for $350,000. So, and he's got his purpose and intent behind it as well, right? And so I think, people make these moves because it matters that much to own the name, own the brand that you're really representing. Who did a rebrand recently? ConvertKit,
ConvertKit,
which
yeah.
already had a great name. I love their name already. Like ConvertKit makes sense.
Yeah,
A great. What do you
kid
think?
is
You don't like
short.
it? Yeah, yeah,
No,
exactly.
I mean kid is shorter, but I like ConvertKit for the context, right? Of it is what it is, right? You lose one for the
No,
other.
I like their original name. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
But surely they saw value in, hey, going from ConvertKit to Kit.com. And I think I just saw some emails from them. They're officially now like trying to like move everything to Kit.com. I don't know if they did. Let me check online. Nope, it's still in the works.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had ConvertKit 11 years ago, it looks like, and only now secured Kit.com 11 years later. So the concept is you don't need to have the best name. You don't need to have a 6 figure, 7 figure, 8 figure name. They will be available and they will be for sale. But you're going to pay a premium for them as the demand for that name becomes greater, which makes sense, right? Supply and demand. There's only one of that name available. So um, if you can afford it 5, 10 years from now, by all means. But if you think you can get a cheaper price today than you will 5, 10 years from now when you've blown up, then you should probably get it today. And I think that's what happened in Andrew's case with Acquire. I think had he waited a few more years, he would have had to pay near
Much
seven
more.
figures for it, much
Right.
more. Yep. And so to me, that was a steal, great purchase. Yeah, so there's a lot of these type of instances, and I think it goes back to when to make the investment. You make the investment if you know you're in it for the long haul.
Right.
If you're not, don't.
I mean, if you know the formula, you know what you're going to you know how you're going to recoup that value. If you understand that, like just with the example of Rocket Hub, right? I mean, I keep looking at this message because it's 2021 when you
Yep.
sent it, right? And you're like grand vision invoice, and I'm like, congrats, we only live once, right?
Oh, that
And
was
you're like, yeah, exactly, but that wasn't a decision that you took lightly, and we moved quickly to make sure that was the first objective, right? Can we make sure we get the money back, you know
actually I'm looking at Andrew's tweet now, and I have to correct myself. Did he pay 200 something thousand or 2 million? I'm still looking at it.
2 million. Oh well, 2 million. Let's see. Let's see.
What did he
Now we're
buy it
doing
for?
research quietly.
Yeah,
Hold
yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah. Now I'm curious. I forget. If you pay 240,000 for it, that's great. If you paid 2 million for it, that's still great. But then it's not as much of a steal.
Yeah. Um,
I
and some
think
other
he says two. Yeah, I think he says 2 million.
two
Uh,
million.
yeah, if that's
How much
right.
is it?
I don't know. Another page says it was 240. This page says 2 million. But yeah, I just want to make sure I'm giving good info.
I mean, to be fair, let's just say I had to pull you out of a meeting and
Yeah,
keep harassing you for like 30 minutes to say, let's go, because I know that you will do the work versus come and chat. So we're very prepared, everyone. Don't quote us. This is not a valuation
we're just
session.
going off the cuff. But
Yeah.
no, I think it is. I think it is 250, 240,000. But we'll find out.
Okay. I mean, there were
Yep.
some other companies that did this as well over the past few years. We have a list. We probably will tweet it after we
Yeah, that would
verify
be
that it's
that would be a good
legit.
one. I think we should make a list. Yeah, yeah. Maybe after this call, we'll go ahead and publish a post of like 10 recent domain name acquisitions that are like fun, right? That make a lot of sense. So that'd be a nice blog post.
You know, it'd be so. The important thing here is that you don't always have to purchase a 5, 6, 7 figure domain name. Even like for the small business owner, that person just starting up, right? You could go for a few hundred because it gives you that leverage, the leverage that you need to, like, for example, with Rocket Hub. Remember what we did, right? What you did. Now, after you purchased it, we went immediately and like blogged the heck out of that thing, right? And so now all of a sudden we were ranking in a matter of like 3 days for the hardest terms, right? Like startups, founders, and it's still happening every time we publish something. Um, it's always ranking in just a few days, but that's the leverage. And if you have like a smaller niche, you could pay just maybe a few $1,000s or a few hundred and get that same leverage.
Absolutely. I think this is one of those things that it's hard to calculate the ROI, but it's definitely visible.
Mhm.
So I will always choose starting from something over nothing. And so if I can cheat my way from zero to get an advantage, I definitely will. And I think that was definitely one of the advantages of paying the extra money up front. But now we had to do less work to get our SEO juices flowing. And I think we also have to do less work. Anytime we publish a blog post, it hits instantly. Um, I think we have to do less work for credibility, right?
Right.
People see the name, they're like, okay, these guys are legit. They didn't spend only $8 for some name. So I think a lot of value did come from that, and it's definitely within the 2.5 years it's repaid itself. Like we got our money's worth, right? And
Yeah.
I would say most of the people that I have seen, most of the businesses that I've seen that have paid some absurd, amount for a domain name have usually recouped it within a few years. You just have to know how to recoup it.
Yeah, that's the formula, the blueprint. Like, okay, so say for example, today, you and I, we started some ridiculous thing, like great startups, right? Say for example, we did that, right? And it was maybe a few hundred or a few $1,000s, right? But then the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
formula, the blueprint, what happens is you have to know what you're going to do with it, right? Like, what are you going to build on top of it to increase its value, right? And then all of a sudden, whether the business wins or loses, you still win because now you've added all that value on top of that asset, right?
Actually, you're gonna love this because even I forgot about this. You're gonna love this story. So speaking of great startups, so greatstartups.com itself was also something I'm probably aging myself here. I just Googled and I didn't know this until after I bought it. So I also
Hmm.
bought greatstartups.com at auction for the obvious reason. I talk a lot about startups and I wanted to have a home base for great startups. And I
Hmm.
wanted to create something that was, helping startups grow, give them visibility and exposure, things like that. And
Right.
so what I did is about 4 years ago, I'm looking at the listing here, and I'm looking at me being outbid multiple times during that listing. August August 2020. I'm going to tell you guys what I paid
How much
for
did you
great
pay?
startups.
No, wait,
It's
hold on. Let me guess. Let me guess. Hold on.
Yeah, you're
Let me
gonna
guess.
love it. Go ahead.
Don't tell me you paid the 50% code King Kong, like that discount. Did you? Don't tell you. Did you pay 99 cents? Because if you did, I'll be
No,
shitting.
it was not expensive. I will say this: I got it for what I think is a steal.
Okay, how much? How much?
$705 is what I
Oh,
won it for on auction. Yeah. See
that's
what I
not
mean,
bad.
though? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not bad. Now for those that don't know, again, there's a little context here. Now, that was in 2020 that I bought that domain name. But there's an interesting story behind this that I didn't even like connect the dots on until just 2 months ago.
Hmm.
It turns out that in 2014, so 6 years before I bought the domain at auction, I had
Right.
reached out to the original owner, and I have an email to the original owner who I cold emailed
Right.
to show you like how my brain works. And I'm going to read you my email. Hey, just wondering if you own where is it? Yeah. Um, if you own this domain, and if so, would you be willing to sell it to me? And the owner wrote back, I do own that domain, and if you wish to make an offer, go ahead and make an offer. Um, and let's see, it offered him a few $100 for it. He said, that won't cut it. I'm looking for a few thousand, but I have these other names if you're interested in that could fit your budget. And
Right.
the other names weren't as good as great startups. Um, and so that's kind of where it left off. And that was 2014. Fast forward to 2020, comes up on the auction site on GoDaddy, and I buy it for a whopping $705, which is a great deal in my opinion, especially for a name that I apparently wanted almost 6 years before and didn't even know I had emailed the original owner back then. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, full circle it seems. But yeah, so great startups, same concept. Now the cool thing about great startups, not as obviously not as rich history, but it does have its own history for those old timers like me. Uh, Back in the day, Great Startups was like a really small blog related to startups. It would feature up and coming startups, which is what we do today. That's the whole purpose of it today, technically. It's one of the aspects of what we want to do as we're building it this week and next week and the following week,
Mm.
is to feature up and coming startups. And so, and that was 10 years ago when that site existed. It went offline. Now we're kind of coming back with essentially the same idea with some tweaks of our own, but we're doing the same thing, really unknowingly that that's really was what before. Um, but I was checking, and I noticed some of the backlinks from way back then still exist.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
we're not starting at zero again.
Right.
And for $700, I'll take that. In fact, some link building agencies would charge you $300 to $600 for a high quality backlink
Right.
from a
Exactly.
publication, right?
You also have
Um,
another company that
yeah,
the
that does that. That
facility.
helps you do that. Yeah, exactly. That helps you get those for free.
Mhm.
But that's what some link building agencies charge. Well, I paid
Right.
$700 for the domain. That's essentially the cost of like two backlinks, right?
Yeah,
Eh,
that's the leverage, right? It's
Right,
like, hmm
right.
oh,
So
eight
yeah, I think that's a steal when I haven't checked. I should probably check. I could do it right now. I haven't really checked its backlink history, but I'm going to go check it and tell you, was my $700 fruitful? Looks like, yeah, it's got about, uh, yeah, it was fruitful. I'm looking at some of the backlinks. They are very legit sites like the nextweb.com.
Mm-hmm.
Social compare, yeah. So funding, bizsugar.com, that's another great one. So yeah,
Yeah.
these are legit sites that it maintains some backlinks from. And so even if, let's just say, out of the 50 backlinks that it currently has, let's just pretend 10 of them are good.
Yeah.
For $700 to start off that way, that's great. I'll take it all day long.
The interesting thing is, if they still, so for example, this strategy is like the H domain strategy, because if you purchase a domain that's like 10, 15 years old in your niche, it's likely going to have those relevant links already built out for it, right? And then you're not starting at DR5.
Not starting at
uh,
DR0, right? So yeah,
yeah.
starting at zero sucks,
Yeah, you
right?
always say that.
Avoid it. Avoid starting at zero. Nobody likes to start at zero. You don't start with a blank piece of paper, right? So why would you start with a blank site, right? Like, doesn't make sense. So I think that was worth it. Um, what tools do you use when you look for domain names?
Um, I'll say Chat GPT. Now I'm all like Chat GPT everything.
Do you use
But
ChatGPT for that?
I
I mean, I
do.
guess
Like
you
it's
could, right?
creation, right? And
Hmm.
um, then you can look at like just those simple free domain valuation tools as well, like to see, and then I do like Namecheap just because I just put all the domains there. And, when I get bored, I go and I shop for domains that I don't need. I have a bunch of them too. Um, and then every so often I'll go check how much are you worth today, even if I didn't build anything on it, just to make myself feel better. um, and I still have that. Remember that one domain I told you I bought about pretty software, but I inadvertently bought it at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was like so pretty sass. And then I was like, oh shit, it's not. If you break that down incorrectly, you could sell it to a whole different market.
That's true.
But yeah,
Yes, that's true.
yeah. Um, so I think that was those simple things, and then there are a lot of sites like that. You can do Flippa, right? That's still a thing where you
It's
can
still a
actually
thing.
Mhm.
Yep, that's still a thing. I think their heyday was definitely the early kind of like mid 2000s to early like 2010, 2012, and then they
Right,
kind of tapered off a little. But to give them credit, they're now kind of adding more fuel in the tank is probably the right word. I see some development happening. I see some more activity happening. I see them modernizing themselves. Um,
right.
so there is some stuff happening in that for them, but it may be too little, too late. Who knows? But I feel like most people have moved on, at least from my era, from the Flippa world to other places.
I mean, so I think the natural evolution was Andrew's site, acquire.com, right? First you're buying and selling websites, and now you're buying and selling software, right?
Yep,
So we're
exactly. Yep.
properties, yeah, that are built out. But even for the smaller player, you could buy a completely like an age domain with the website on it, and then build that up more. At you could do it like a few $1,000s, right?
Oh yeah, you
That's
get
possible.
multiple for a few $1,000s if you're really willing to put in the time, the effort. I think most people don't really think about auctions much.
Mhm.
That's not their first thought, whereas that's usually my first thought is I'm just going to the auctions to see like, is there anything related to what I want? If so, I'll bid on it. It's a pretty easy process. There's no rocket science to it. Otherwise, I think the second thing that I do is go look at the premium domains that are available on GoDaddy, on Dan.com, on
Mhm.
Atom. What's the other one? I think they renamed to Atom. But there's a bunch of good ones like that, um, where doing a simple search for the keyword that you're looking for is enough. If nothing else, at least it tells you the ballpark that people are selling at. I
Right.
basically, in my filters, I always eliminate anybody that doesn't have a price. So then I have a really good sense of what can I get. And I'll also actually filter for everything less than $1,000 because I want to
Mhm.
see if there's anything I can get for less than $1,000. that is probably worth more than that, right? Or at least I'm not trying to spend crazy amount on it. But I think that exercise doesn't take long. I mean, usually I'll have a list of names for any new startup or company within an hour,
Right.
right? Then it's just a matter of narrowing it down. But now that you know that they are for sale and you know what price they're at, if you want to go to the next level, just go use who is to contact them and make an offer,
Right.
right?
I mean, I do
Yeah.
that. Like, if I know what domain I want, even if it's taken, especially like the .coms, I'll go look at the website, who owns it, because you never know. They might not even be in business anymore, right?
Yep.
Like, they might just want to sell it. And so, okay. So for those who don't know what who is .com, explain that a little bit.
So all domain names essentially have um, a way to contact the registrant, the person
Mm,
who owns it. Now, obviously, people don't want to make their emails public. So nowadays, most registrars keep that information private, but they still have a mechanism for you to contact the registrant. You just don't see their email address. If the registrant wishes to respond to you, they can reply back. Back in the day, you could just see their email address and email them right away and say, "Hey, John or Jack or Jill, I see you own this domain name. I'd like to buy it." It was so much easier. Now, a little bit more gated, for privacy reasons, obviously, but that you could still get to people who own a domain name. I've secured several names just uh, sending a, "Hey, I'm interested in contacting the registrant." The registrant replied back saying, "Okay, I'm the owner. What's your question?" And then I said, "Hey, I'd like to buy this domain name." They threw a price out, and we made the deal happen. So um, again, you just got to make moves. You just got to send it if you're really interested. And keep in mind, most people aren't going to respond because maybe it doesn't even hit the top of their inbox, or whatever. They just don't get to it. But those who are genuinely interested in selling their domain names will respond almost immediately because they do
right.
this all the time, right? So
And I mean, you
um,
could do a domain search, go to LinkedIn and see who put that in their profile, and then just reach out to them there. Um,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
that's another way. I mean, actually, it actually extends even further if thinking about brand building. Um, when you acquire such a domain name that let's just say, a really popular name, a one-word name or whatever, um, the next layer of that is, oh, could you get the social handles,
right, yeah,
right? And that's tougher. That's a much tougher ordeal than just getting the domain name.
right,
I'm one of those people that I want my brand name to match everywhere. I want the domain name. I want the social handles. Um, I always thought to myself, what would be a good business for someone? I don't want to do it, but someone else should start this idea. Uh, Instead of selling just domain names, sell brands. So the way I would do that is you have the domain name, but you acquire all the major handles for that domain name as well. And now you sell that as a bundle or a package. So now when a brand's like, "Oh, I want," making this up, let's just say it's thirsty.com. Well, now you have your Twitter handle, Thirsty, your Facebook handle, your LinkedIn, your TikTok handle. And so now I'm willing to pay more of a premium
mhm,
because you have those handles secured as well, and those are easy to transfer. Just give me the password, or change the email address on them, and we're good to go. So that, I think, would be a wonderful business. I haven't seen anybody do that. I've always
can tell.
wanted to do that, but it's like number 500 on my ideas list. But I know I'm a buyer if that was the
Mhm.
case. If someone was selling stuff in that type of packaged branded bundle, I would totally be like scouting that site anytime I want a new brand name for one of my businesses.
I mean, it's a tailored service, like because the minutia associated with claiming the handles, getting like sending Instagram a message saying we have this new domain, etc. Right? Like it's a lot of time, and I think that's. I mean, you know, Charlie, guess what? I think we're at the hour mark. Are we? Did we hit the hour mark already?
It's for too long. Okay,
Oh, no,
so
no, no. I know we could talk for like 3 hours. Oh, we're near the hour
I
mark.
could talk about
Oh,
this all day long.
yeah.
But yeah, so so here, let me end with like two or three cool tools that people would like. Um,
Okay.
the first one is a tool. They're no longer as cool as they used to be, but I'll give you the name. It is leandomainsearch.com. Okay. Back in the day, free site, you put in a word and it'll give you available domain names with that word at the beginning of the name and the end of the name. You can toggle it whichever way you like. And about a few years ago, the company that runs WordPress, Automatic, acquired them.
Oh, nice.
Now, yeah, so for those who don't know, Automatic owns the TLD .blog. So
Mhm.
.blog is actually an Automatic owned TLD. So I don't like it as much now because they put in all the blogs in there. So now it's like muddying up my results. But I wish they had a filter for just show me the .coms. I don't want the blogs, but still a cool site, at least for ideas and inspiration. There's another one that, again, Dharmesh Shah from HubSpot, he has a cool AI tool called Agent.ai. Let me pull it up. What's it say? The Professional Network for AI Agents, a marketplace and professional network for AI agents and the people who love them. So basically bots, right? AI bots that do a very specific thing. There, he has an agent specifically on domain name valuation. Okay. So if you Google like agent.ai domain name valuation, I'm sure you'll come across it. We can put it in the notes as well afterwards. Very cool. And also, surprisingly, um, I looked it up just to see like, okay, how off are these domain name valuations?
Yeah. Oh, I
Surprisingly
did that
pretty good.
yesterday.
Yeah,
Yeah, I did
surprisingly
that.
pretty good. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I was very impressed with how, again, I'm not going to say there was like, valuation itself is subjective art, but um, I was impressed with the fact that when I compared it to certain valuations of domain names I knew had sold, and
Right.
I knew how much they had sold for, and then I asked the agent AI like, okay, what do you think this domain's worth? It was pretty close, and so it uses actual domain sales history, so like real
Oh, that's.
sales,
Mhm.
to determine the valuation. So it's not like just making it up out of thin air. And so
Right.
this domain appraiser AI agent is like awesome. I love it. So I was pretty impressed with that. And then for the social handles, another cool thing is I think there's one called Namecheck or something like that, namecheck.com or namechk.com or namec name checker or name. Um, you put in your handle and it checks Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all of them to tell you which one's already taken. All right.
Mm.
And so that's a good way to figure out if you can do that domain ID I gave you about the branded
I'm not
domain
doing
plus
that.
social handles. You could just
I'm
use
not.
some of those tools. So yeah, so those are three really cool tools that I use a lot. Other than that, it's just off the cuff.
Let me ask you this, okay? Just a quick question. Do you think that GoDaddy's valuation tool is accurate? I
No,
mean, I know they would
absolutely
have.
not.
I Okay,
No,
that's what I thought
no,
because I was
no. I
testing it.
would not. That's the last one I would use is the
Mhm.
GoDaddy valuation tool. I think there are so many other tools out there, this AI agent and some others that provide far better values. Now, to give
Mhm.
credit where it's due, at least in the GoDaddy, some of the pages, you will see actual sales of premium domain names and what it's sold for. So
Mhm.
that is a much better indicator of, okay, are you in the
Then the
same
value.
ballpark? Yeah, then yeah, exactly. Then the valuation. The valuation, yeah, I'm not, I wouldn't put too much merit on that.
It seems like they didn't merge the data. I mean, they have the data. They should just merge it and, you
Yeah, I
know,
mean, they have more data than anybody else, right? With regard to us. So, it's one of those things where it's like, hey, you could do a whole lot better on this if you wanted to. if it was a
Hmm.
priority. I don't think it's a priority.
It's just a lead, a
Yeah,
traffic
it's a lead
generator.
generator. Yeah, it's a lead
Yeah.
generator. That's not really the business they want to be in either. So I guess not. So um,
Okay,
yeah, I
and then
would.
final question before we like head off here. What TLDs should people avoid buying at all costs? We know they should buy .com, .org, .net if so, but what should they avoid at all costs?
Um, well, I mean, personally, the easy answer, that any professional domainer is going to give you, and I'm not a professional, I'm an amateur, um, is, .com or bust, right? Right? It's like you shouldn't touch anything that's not a .com. Um, the do I feel there's eh, maybe let me answer this differently. If you were trying to resell these, then my answer stands: .com or bust. You should only stick to .com. Is there a small segment out there that's willing to buy like a .io? Sure. Yeah.
Mm,
Um, a .net or a .co, even smaller than the .io nowadays, in my opinion. So
mm,
if I had to choose four TLDs where that I would secure for my brand, it's always going to be the .com, .net, .co, and .io. Those are the
right.
four that I'll play with. Would I pay top dollar for anything that's not a .com? Absolutely.
I agree. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a fun impromptu conversation, and hopefully we'll be back here next week with a more. Well, actually, I think that was a great conversation. What do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, yeah, I think, hey, for the folks that, always think about this or procrastinate all day looking for domains or, what they're going to call their site or whatever, hopefully you get some value out of this. If nothing else, we can at least talk shop about domains all day. And, maybe people can tell us more interesting stories about their domain purchases. That would be awesome.
And oh, and before we go, there's some people who have been with us like this whole conversation. They didn't even see our faces. They're just like super supporters. I want to shout them out. We have Tiggs, Dan, Uella, Lisa, Dylan. Thank you for just sitting in here and
Oh,
listening to
look
me
at
and
that.
Charlie.
Yeah, most people don't want to listen to me.
Most people run away from Charlie's
Yeah, yeah. Like, oh
conversation.
no, he's on a tangent now, talking about domains.
I had to
Someone
pull
tell
you.
him to someone tell him to do work.
But this is the kind of fun we want to have. Like this is what we do like all the time. It's just talk about like real stuff, right? Real decisions. So um, thank you, Charlie, for your time and for letting me pull you away from the design, creative
Absolutely.
design. I appreciate you.
Problem
We'll be
anytime.
back next week. Okay.
Yep, next week, more about startups.
All right. See you then or before. But have a great day and thank you everyone for being here with us. And okay, because we're newbies, I don't how do we stop recording? How do we stop the live? Let's see. Oh, there you go. Stopping now.